And we are live. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Let's Talk Fishing video podcast. My name is Jay Angel, and I'm going to be your podcaster tonight. Man, it is my pleasure to introduce my guest tonight. I have a man by the name of Russ Bailey. You've seen him. You've seen him on Brushpile Fishing. I've seen him on the Pursuit channel. Now I have him right here live on the Let's Talk Fishing podcast. I'm honored. Anyways, enough of me. I want to talk to Russ. How are you doing tonight, Russ?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. It's a little bit warm even up here in Ohio. Of course, not as warm down there, but you know what? Doing good. And doing good.
Well, you didn't move down south, so yeah, you can complain about the heat. I can't.
Yeah, I hear you.
Man, I've caught crappies in Ohio before, man. Geez, all kinds of Forked Run, Wolf Run, all kinds of, over there on eastern Ohio.
There's some good lakes, believe it or not, here in Ohio, man. There's some real good lakes.
Well, we have Cajun Rob Fishing just said good evening. Good evening, gents. Well, good evening to you too.
Yes, sir. Nice to join us, bud.
If you guys want to see Russ live fishing, I see him on the Pursuit channel. Where else is your show aired?
I'll tell you what, the easiest way is to, there's a couple easy ways. Go to our website, which is brushpilefishing.com. There's a lot of things on that website, but one of them is view the shows. You can click on whatever season you want, pick whatever show you want. It's all free. Our YouTube channel is the same way. I know 1 month we had like 300,000 views on our YouTube channel. And, we were humbled by that. But also, we've got a Brushpile app, and it doesn't matter if you've got an Apple phone or an Android phone. The app is completely free. And one of the many things that it does is gives you complete access to all of our shows also.
Wow. Well, so where are you going to be fishing next, Russ?
Well, it's funny you ask. I just got a call probably 10 minutes before you and I hooked up here from Rob Zorn. I'm actually going to be heading out to New Jersey. Now, or in Pennsylvania, eastern Pennsylvania, but that won't be until September. But I've got a show getting ready to do on the Ohio River down at Tanner's Creek. We're going to do that one. We're going to go to Weiss Lake, Alabama, and shoot a show with my good friend Jerry Culberson. I've known Jerry for years. I actually go to Weiss, stay down there with him. And we're going to do a show, and then we've got some big fish shows coming up in Mississippi. We're going to go down there and stay at the crappie compound, and we're going to get probably 3 or 4 shows down there in those big lakes.
Ooh, Mississippi! How much fun! And is that Rob Zorn from iBass 360?
The one and only, man, the one and only.
Talked to him a couple days ago. What a good guy that is.
We're going to put something together where we go out there and tape a show, and then on the Saturday that we're there, we're going to do a live in store for him. Have a big going on.
Man, that should be fun. Those guys from iBass 360 are a class act.
Yes, sir. Rob's a great guy. Great guy.
Rob and Eric run that and iBass 360. Folks, check that out. They have a website and they also have a Facebook group. They do a lot of good for the fishing industry. Actually, Rob's over in he's at the ICAST right now.
He is. Yep.
What a good guy. But okay, so you're going to be fishing down on the Ohio River. Down by Kentucky or?
Yeah, just outside of Lawrenceburg, Kentucky.
Now, I do a lot of podcasts with bass fishermen. They tell me that the Ohio River is very difficult. It's very difficult to catch bass on that river. But obviously, if you're going and fishing there, it's got to be a good crappie fishery.
It is, and it doesn't matter what time of year. You can always get back in some of those pockets, catch those fish shallow. We're probably looking at water temperature in the mid 80s right now, and we will probably get this show shot in about 5 to 6 foot of water. Just jigs, vertical jigging, and we should have a good time.
Vertical jigging. Wow. Okay, here's a great question for a crappie guy. Do you like to throw bobbers, or you mostly free line?
So I'm a dock shooter if I've got my choice. Okay. Um, we do dock shooting a little bit different. We'll use a small cork. And when you say cork, people think of a bigger bobber or a slip cork. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a super, super small, almost looks like an ice float. If you look up crappie magnet on their website, it's the panfish edition. It is smaller than the crappie edition. I go smaller. I want just a big enough cork to hold up whatever size of jig head I use. And normally, if I'm using a cork, I'm going with a 1/32 ounce. And I'll tell you what, especially, this time of year, it doesn't matter. This time of year, I'm not using a cork as much because the fish are so active. We've had steady weather patterns. The wind is laid down, and those fish are basically where they're going to stay all summer. So we'll flip under there, and we won't use a cork. But during the spring and the early winter, when you have those cold fronts come in, having that little cork, and I'm telling you, it's small. Look that one up. But having that little cork makes all the difference in the world, because I told you I like shooting. So say I shoot underneath a pontoon boat or under a dock. Basically, I'm getting 20 foot back. Okay. I'm hitting a lot of areas that nobody else fished. But now the difference is, if I shot that without a cork, first of all, how long am I actually going to be in the strike zone? And we're not talking active fish. So if you don't get them on that initial drop, they're not going to chase that bait. They're not going after it. But now with that small cork, if you can imagine this, I shoot that 20, 25 feet back. I'm vertical jigging that all the way back as slow as I want. Never have to worry about, is it in the strike zone? And I can work it as slow as I want. And one of the things that we found, of course, with using live scope, we've learned a lot. But I've done a lot of seminars over the year on the bass tanks. And one of the things I see, I'll just barely move that cork. Barely move it to where it may twitch this much. And that jig may only rise that much and then settle back down. But those crappie magnet tails, they'll sit there. And what I've seen in those tanks is, when I pop that, the fish, it'll adjust itself and look at it, but it won't take it. But then when it rests down and it quivers, they'll come up and mouth that, and you will not feel that at all. But with that small cork, you may see it turn just a little bit. It won't even lay on its side, let alone go under. But when you learn to see just that little quiver, set the hook, and you're going to catch fish on days nobody else is during these cold fronts. And if you want
awesome. So when you say shoot,
yes, sir. So when I'm shooting, okay.
Now, when you say shoot, could you explain the process of shooting?
Sure. So shooting, I love dock fishing. I love shooting under pontoons. And what that means is, you'll see a lot of people come into a cove and they'll hit the outside edge, or maybe flip a jig, 2 foot underneath that or whatever. A lot of times those fish are in what I call the blackest water. They're all the way back in that darkest water. They're looking for that shade. And a lot of times that's untouched by fishermen. So I'll take a 6 foot, it's called a Sharpshooter 6 by B&M. It's specifically made for this. And you actually pull that jig back, and your rod looks like a bow and arrow. It's got a big bow in it. And I'm looking under there, and I'm shooting, and it flings that sucker. And I'm getting way back. I can shoot that 25 foot. I've actually got to the point with my Signature Series rod, which is an 8 and a 10.5 foot. I can basically flip that far under the docks now too.
Wow!
But you're hitting water that not hit.
Nobody else can hit that water. I know I certainly can't. And I've been practicing, skipping, but that's bass lures. That's a completely different mindset than what you're talking about. I actually seen there's a guy named Blaine Salter down here that makes Blaine's jigging poles, and I've watched him do that, and he's good. He's good.
Love it. And
he's good.
The one thing is too, if you're fishing during those days where the fish seem to be locked up, first thing I'm going to do is get with my live scope and go down that row of pontoons or the row of docks, whatever I'm going to fish. And I'm going to see which ones have concentrations of fish under them. I'm going to see exactly where they're at under the surface. And then you set that cork. And that's why I say you're never having to guess if you're in a strike zone. You're always going to be there.
That's yes. That is live scope is definitely. When I first heard of live scope, I was talking to a walleye fisherman. And man, he was telling me about live scope, and I said, I can see the applications for crappies. you know, this sounds more like a crappie type thing than a. Well, I saw what he was saying too. That he can eliminate miles of water now.
Exactly.
and but my mind first came because I don't know if you know this, but most of the guiding I did over 17 years of guiding in Northern Illinois was for crappies. And we didn't have this back then, I had a GPS that really wasn't, I haven't guided since 2011, but I had a GPS that could kind of sort of get me into the general area.
Yeah, the live scope.
And I had vertical.
And I'll tell you something else along those lines. On the national tournament trails, if you don't know how to use the live scope, you absolutely cannot compete anymore. You look at, and it's a lot of young guys winning these tournaments. The guys grew up playing video games. They're awesome on this stuff. And Hayden Jeffries, I mean, the kid is basically unbeatable. He is one heck of a fisherman. But if you don't know how to use that, it is going to be so tough for you to compete on any of the trails.
Well, that's what I tell people. A few of my friends have bought live scope because they watch my show. And I say, it's not plug and play, man. Get on YouTube, sit there, watch. Instead of watching TV at night, sit there and watch YouTube videos. Learn how to tweak your settings because it's different from 5 feet to 10 feet to 15 feet. I know it's going to get better.
It is. And to me, it was probably, one of the easiest units to learn. Once I learned where my adjustments were, I mean, it's basically easy to learn. And once you got it down, man, you can tune into them things.
That's what I could not believe the first time I saw it. I was bass fishing with a friend, and I said, that's a crappie. No, it's not. How can you tell what kind of fish that is? Look at it, man. Does that look like a bass profile to you?
Sorry about this off. I've had a little thing, but I'll tell you what, I've been in the fishing industry for a long time, and by far, this is the biggest game changer I've seen come along.
Sure. You know what? The biggest game changer for me was mapping GPS.
Yep.
It's, you remember back in the old days when we had to triangulate.
Oh yeah. And let me tell you something, Jay. I fish Lake Erie a lot. Okay. I remember the days out on Lake Erie, and when you're way out there, that shoreline looks the same. Yes. So you got some markers in the daylight. Sometimes it's tough, but at nighttime, oh man, because the fish are biting. You stay out a little bit longer than you should. Now it's dark. That was a bear getting back in. So you're right. GPS was awesome, man.
Forget about it, man. How are you going to find the harbor?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. I mean, I've just been on the lakes of northern Wisconsin and even Canada, and got, like you said, got a little excited, started catching some walleyes up in Canada, and
yes, sir.
Now I can't find oh my. Yeah. And there's reefs all over the place. Yeah, that's dangerous.
It is.
Wow. But okay, so you have a favorite type of soft plastic you use?
I only use one. It's called Crappie Magnets, a company, Leland Lures. They've got one. It's called the Slab Magnet. It's a bigger bait, and normally I like using the bigger baits. And if you want to see this bait in action, I'm not sure what series, but just look up Brushpile Fishing Wisconsin. We did one show in Wisconsin, and I'll give you a little background on that show, okay? Normally, I set up the shows, who we're fishing with, and this and that, because we only have like one day to tape, and we got to hit the road. So our office actually set this show up. We had a resort up there that called and said, hey, we'd love Brushpile to come up here and fish, tape a show. So we get up there, it's cold. It's October up in Wisconsin. It was cold. But we got up there, and I met the guide the morning that we were scheduled to fish. And he shakes hand, nice guy, man. He said, hey, I do want to tell you up front. He said, I'm a walleye guide. He said, if I catch crappie, it's by mistake. So, man, I am like, oh, you got to be kidding me.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I told him, I said, well, listen, I said, what's your water temperature? He told me, I said, do you have any structure in about 10, 15 foot of water? He said, yeah, I do. So we go out and I'm using a slab magnet. He's got his big walleye rig on, slip cork, big minnow hook. He's using minnows. And man, I start dropping that slab magnet down in that structure, and it's just thump, thump, thump. And he said, are you tipping out with live bait? I said, there's no live bait on this, man. By the end of the show, he's using my signature series rod, and he's using the slab magnets. They're awesome baits. That's my favorite. I can let you in on a little secret on your podcast.
Sure.
Jeff Smith and I, Jeff's the owner of Leland Lures. We've been working for, gosh, it's close to a year now on a new bait. It's an idea that him and I have been going back and forth on. And I just got what I think is going to be the next to last prototype and tried them out. Dynamite. I can't tell you what they're going to be called. Can't tell you what they look like, but they are going to be dynamite. And I've got to try them. And I've took two buddies with me. They know I'm not lying about this. It's going to be a dynamite bait. So that may overtake the slab magnet with me here soon.
Wow. Can you tell us what lake you were on in Wisconsin?
Turtle Flambeau.
Yeah. Okay.
Turtle Flambeau.
Yeah, that's up there, upper, like northwest. Yeah, I've been on the Turtle Flambeau. In fact, it's up there by Park Falls, Wisconsin, not very far away.
Beautiful fish up there. They had that goldish green tint from being in.
Yes.
And like I say, all of our shows are free. Look that one up and watch that one, because that's the scenery up there was absolutely gorgeous.
We were up there in October, man. That was, geez,
it was cold.
That's like, man, leaves turning season.
It was cold.
But leaves turning, man, that's.
Yep. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. And we've got some great drone footage from overhead, so you get to see the whole area, and it's really nice.
That's wow. Northern Wisconsin, both sides of my family are from Wisconsin. I've been fishing that. I had a grandpa who lived up there in Park Falls for years, so I'd go up there and float the Flambeau River for walleyes and northerns and smallmouth bass. It never occurred to us to fish for crappies up there. That is great. That's practically in Wisconsin. I can tell you where people are walleyes are king. Particularly in northern Wisconsin, that's a very underutilized resource they have.
And when you see some of the crappie up there, oh my gosh, it's worth the trip up there. It really is.
Well, you're catching 10, 12 inches, or?
We call some 13s and 14s.
Wow. I mean, I'm very rarely speechless, but in northern Wisconsin, a 13 or 14 inch. Wow. Yes. Some of the places you fish, like northern Mississippi, a 14 inch, you can't even keep them till they're 12.
Well, yeah. One of the things I've been blessed is, when you think about it, I get to go all over the country. I get to fish the absolute best lakes there are with the best fishermen in the country. And the way that I look at our show, if you're my guest on tomorrow's TV show, okay, to me, that's your show. I want you to tell the people why you like fishing this lake, why you like this time of year, why you like this technique. And basically, I'm there to get a good fishing trip out of you, but also just to bring the story along. And I've been blessed. I really have.
You have one of the coolest jobs.
It's been fun.
Ever. I didn't know what to use. Russ, you're making me speechless. You're twice in the same show. This doesn't happen very often.
I think one of the things, we've had, a couple of years ago, we hit our 100th episode, and for a small, that's it just is unheard of. But I think one of the things that keeps our show going and keeps it different than some of the other shows is, instead of you seeing me doing the same thing every week, there's a fish. We do have, through my years of tournament fishing and my B&M pro staff, I have access to the absolute best crappie anglers in the country. And there are so many different techniques and patterns. And I have a new guest every week bringing you something completely new. So our show is always different.
Wow. I did notice that. That's why I watched your show more than once. 2019, I had major surgery and it took months I was off work for months. I got really bored and I started going through the Pursuit channel. I said, oh, Brushpile Fishing. I bet that might be crappies. And I found you.
Yep.
And I watched one. Okay. My dad was a crappie fanatic, my late father. So I grew up catching crappies. And we, back in the 70s, you had a little bobber. Other people use those big round things, which was less than an optimal thing. But Dad knew you had to use a little bobber, and you put a fathead minnow on it, an Aberdeen hook, and that's how we fish for crappies. But you did all kinds of different things, and that's why I went back to your show. And back. I mean, through years of crappie guiding, I learned all kinds. I started talking to crappie fishermen. How do I catch these things? Fathead minnows aren't working. What do I do? And they started turning me on to different things, and I, caught on to them through. I've been fishing obsessively since I was old enough to do it on my own.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was great. Okay, here's a great question for you. I'm sure you have many favorite crappie lakes, but is there one that sticks out in your mind?
I'm going to tell you, and this is going to surprise a lot of people because most people, if they have fished in Mississippi, Grenada or Sardis or Arcabella, one of those are going to be their favorite if they've been there. And if you want your absolute best shot at a 3-pound plus, it is one of those lakes. Okay. No doubt about it. But again, I'm a dock shooter, and you have time for a little story. So,
sure.
So I'm a retired police officer. Okay. And sure. I got to the police department. There was a group of 8 or 9 of us. Every year we started a fishing trip. We would go to Weiss Lake, Alabama. And again, we all shot docks. We worked the shallows. And that's, oh my gosh, it's probably been 30, 35 years ago now. But we went every single year. Now, all of us have retired, but I've made such good friends down there at Weiss Lake. I still go every year. Daryl Baker, great friend of mine. He's a guy down there. Jerry Culberson. So Weiss Lake, I love shooting docks. I love going back to those same areas that I fished, years ago with all my buddies at the PD, the memories and everything. I love Weiss.
Okay. Size fish, numbers. Is it a size fishery? Is it a numbers fishery?
So it's you get both. You can catch some 2-pound plus fish there, but the numbers are incredible. And they have black crappie, they have white crappie. And whether you like fishing deep brush piles or you like docks or shallow water, Weiss offers a little bit for everything. They really do. Long lining is a huge technique there.
Long lining crankbaits?
What? No, jigs in the springtime. Small jigs
in the springtime. Okay.
Yep.
That's one thing that really, when I really started getting into trolling for walleyes, if I were trolling like a size 5 Shad Rap, I could not believe, particularly in some of the lakes in Wisconsin, like Lake Winnebago, I'd come in with a 13-inch crappie and I have one on the wall that's only an inch longer than this. Wow.
Kent Driscoll is probably one of the best crankbait guys in the country. And I can remember years ago when I did my first show with him and we pulled crankbaits, and man, it was nothing. And it was the middle of summer. A lot of them guys won't even start till the water hits 80 degrees or up. And we would have 3 or 4 rods going down at the same time. And you would catch the monster crappie. And we were using Bandit 300 series. That's a big crankbait. And you'd catch a few fish that were just a little bit bigger than the crankbait, but had the whole thing in their mouth. It's like, what were they thinking? But they're going for that reaction bite. And I'll tell you what, crankbaiting in the summer, that's a dynamite pattern.
They're more aggressive than I ever thought they were when I was young. Yes.
Yeah.
I got to ask you a question. Did you ever fish or did you ever meet a guy named Tommy Scarless?
I knew Tommy. I did.
God rest his soul. He was. I fished with him several times, and just you talk about your tournament career and for those of you guys who don't know him, I fished with him back in the mid to late 90s when the PWT was big, and I didn't fish against him. I was an outdoor writer, and PWT would invite writers to come and fish with their pros during the pre-fishing time. And I fished with Tommy because he just made it more fun.
Tommy was a great guy. I got to see him at his last seminar in Indianapolis. He didn't get do an actual seminar, but he did get wheeled up on stage and he talked to everyone. And it was tough, man. Tough.
That was tough. And I didn't mean to bring you down, but that was a good memory. I remember the good times with Tommy when, we were both, gosh, you're talking mid-90s. This was 20, 30 years ago, man. And we just had some great times.
So let me tell you, okay, because, I talked about Weiss Lake, the memories
yes.
you have. You're talking about fishing and Tommy and memories you had. We got a pattern going here, okay? And I think sometimes that's what we try to put in our show. If you can watch a show, we just released it on our website and YouTube this month. It's the latest show with Mike Ellis. Give you a little background on that show. Mike called me and told me a story. And Mike's about 63, 64 years old, okay? And he told me, he says, Russ, he said, I know you don't fish on private lakes, but he said, I got one. He said, every spring, he said, I go back to the same structure I fished with my dad and his best friend. And he says, every spring, he said, I never miss a year because every time I'm in those areas, the memories keep coming back. And he told me this whole story. And I said, we're getting a show on this. And we did it. It aired. It's you can check it out now. But again, the memories, and that's what fishing's all about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Every time I fish for crappies, it reminds me of my late father, and it's just good memories.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Dad actually, the last place he lived, he had a huge house on a private lake in northern Arkansas. And he kept telling me, Jay, there are crappies in here, but they're all out in the basin. I said, oh, you have white crappies. He said, well, there are black crappies in here too, because I've caught them. So I came there. He lived on a bay. And I started going up into the woods around his house, and we bought a whole bunch of concrete blocks. Next thing you know, he had over 70 trees sunk in his bay.
Heck yeah.
And all the crappies go like, you know what they'll do.
Yes, sir.
He's like, I can catch crappies on my dock now. I said, yes, you sure can.
That's awesome. I
was proud of that,
Yep.
And like you talk about memories, I wanted to create memories for Dad. So
yeah,
it's just, fishing is more than just fishing to me.
Exactly.
It's about great friends, about meeting people like you, creating memories, going home, taking my son fishing, even though he's, in grad school now.
Yeah. My boy's starting law school, so same thing. Our fishing time.
Yes. Yeah, when he's racing around, I'm sure he remembers all those good times with Dad.
Oh yeah.
What a great memory, man. What a great memory. So when do you think your crappie fishing progressed from putting a minnow on a hook to soft plastics?
So I'll tell you exactly when. I grew up fishing Lake Erie, okay? When I got out of the military, me and a couple guys, we worked at the tank plant. And as soon as we had our days off, we worked midnights. We'd head straight up to Lake Erie walleye fishing. So anyways, the tank plant started laying off people, and that's when I got hired in the police department. And I had caught crappies once in a great while, but all the guys at the PD, we live on a crappie lake, Grand Lake St. Mary's. And they said, hey, we're going fishing tonight. You want to go? And I told them, yeah, because I want to hang out and stuff. But I'm like, man, I'm used to walleye fishing, but I'll go. And it's the first time I ever used, the longer rods, light tackle, light jigs. And that was it for me, man. I was hooked. And I spent every hour I could on there. I started fishing I'm going to give my age away here, but the first tournament trail was called Crappie-thon. And the only way you could get to their classic, you had to finish in the top 3 of a tournament. That's it. There were no divisions.
Wow. That's tough.
But it was awesome because if you made the classic back then, except for your gas to get down there, everything was paid when you got there. It was nice, but that was it for me. And I got to, I got lucky. I got to fish in 14 or 15 national championships, and I started guiding. And it's a funny thing because when I tournament fished, I was competitive. I wanted to win. I didn't want you to see what I was using, this and that. But when I started guiding, a lot of times, and you know this from your guides, but a lot of times you'll take guys that fish maybe once or twice a year. And I can't tell you how many times I would always meet them at the bait store. And the last question they would ask me is, hey, do we have to buy the live bait or you supply it? I said, boys, we ain't using it. And I don't know how many times I've seen guys look at their partner, kind of roll their eyes like, man, what are we getting into? But there is nothing better. There was nothing better than catching a cooler full of fish and seeing those guys with their chest popped out at the end of the day. And I always offered to clean fish. They didn't want them clean because they want to take them home and show their buddies and stuff. And I knew at that minute I've lost my competitiveness. I would rather do something to help people learn stuff. And that's when, the TV thing came along, and it's been awesome for me.
Boy, I'm going to admit something to you. I always had minnows in the boat when the people wanted to fish for crappies.
Yeah.
Just in case, one time out of every 6, I just couldn't. I knew they were there. I could see them on my sonar, and I just couldn't get them to bite.
Good backup plan.
Woo! Your backup plan, Plan D. Yes.
Yes, sir.
And there were times when even that's the thing about guiding. You have to put fish in the boat.
Exactly.
Sometimes there were bluegills. A lot of times I caught bass. Sometimes I caught walleyes. It's nice to live up north. There's so many different kinds of fish.
Yep.
So many different kinds of fish. They weren't as big crappies down here. The size is just phenomenal. But
I'll tell you what. Excuse me, I still got that cough going on. But we do get some nice fish up here. Buckeye Lake in Ohio's got some really nice whites and blacks. And then Lake Erie. Nobody fishes Lake Erie for crappie.
Nobody.
If you look up, I think it's season 6 or whatever, but just, again, if you want to look up that show, put Lake Erie with Jake Hanksler. And we shot that show. When we got up there, we noticed there's rain everywhere in the ditches. So we get to the dock we're putting in, and a local told us, he said, yeah, we had 6 inches of rain overnight. We get to this bay I want to fish. It is muddier than snot. But when you see the fish we caught in 1 to 3 foot of water the whole day, outstanding. The big fish was a 279 in
279?
Lake Erie, and nobody fishes for crappie at Lake Erie.
Well, Lake Erie is just a phenomenal fishery. That was the place I caught my first double-digit walleye. There was just a 10-pound smallmouth bass caught there, and now you're telling me a 2.79-pound crappie. Crappie, guys,
yes,
not small. I have taken freaking bass to the scales and been proud of them at 2.79.
Well, here's another. A lot of your bigger crappie are white crappie. This 279 was a black crappie. That's a monster. And we did a Facebook Live. We're done with that show. I turned him loose. He is still there for somebody to catch.
Wow. We have a question from the audience. It's Cajun Rob Fishing. He said, what is the best time of the year to fish Weiss Lake? And he said he wanted to tell you that that's also his favorite crappie lake.
Okay. Tell him there's 2 times a year that I love going. Now, I'm actually going down there here in a week or so for a summer show, but my favorite times of year, the last week of March to the first couple weeks of April, all those fish are in shallow, and you can get them in riprap, you can get them in the docks, but they're up and they're easy to get. And I also like late October through the first couple weeks of November for the same reason. Those fish come right back into the shallows, and being a dock shooter, man, those are the 2 times a year. Those are the weeks of the year that I would go over anything.
So with your dock shooting technique, how accurate can you be? If you're actually fishing towards riprap, I like to fish it to cast at specific rocks. Can you get within a couple of inches of where you really want to hit?
Yeah. Especially if I've been shooting for a couple of days, you can put something up there and I'll hit it. I'll get into spots this big, and I'll tell you a little story about it. You're a bass guy, so I'm going to tell you a little story, bass guy. So we were at Indianapolis a couple years ago doing seminars during the winter. Okay, so it's winter. I hadn't been fishing for a while. And right next to the seminar spot was the Indiana State bass fishing team for their college. Okay, so a
Sure.
lot of young 18, 19-year-old guys, and I'm talking about dock shooting. And one of the guys, he says, "Hey, I got a question for you." I said, "Yes, sir. Go ahead." He says, "So you think you're good at that?" I said, "I didn't say that. I just said it's my favorite technique." He
Yeah.
said, "But you do it a lot." I said, "Yeah, I do it as much as I can." He said, "Hit that pole over there, clear across stage." There was a little pole that went across. I'm like, "Oh my gosh." Well, when somebody calls you out, you got to at least try, right?
Yeah.
So I just took it, I flinged it back, and all you heard was a ting, and everybody started talking. And that guy sat down real quick. And you know what? I'm gonna tell you, if I'd have done that 9 more times, I'd have missed all 9. But when you hit one, you just walk around your chest. And he didn't have any more questions. But no, it's the more you practice dock shooting, you'll love it because you can get in those areas where no one else does. And it's easy to get started. Don't wait until you're on the boat for the first time you do it. Several ways. You can take a chair, start shooting under that chair, and then when you get good, in 15 minutes, you'll be hitting under the chair every time. Then start saying, you know what, I'm going to hit the back left leg of that chair. Or, set up a 5-gallon bucket on the side. Open your garage door just a little bit and start shooting under that garage door. Then you'll be ready to go out on the water and you'll have a ball doing this. You will have an absolute ball.
Wow. That is great. Well, we're getting to 35 after the hour. Are there any shout outs you'd like to do, Russ?
I'll tell you what, I've talked about how blessed I am. I'd like to talk about B&M Rods. They were one of my first sponsors ever back in the Midwest crappie days. Jack Wells and company have been absolutely outstanding to me. They have supported me through everything. And I can honestly say I would not be here if it wasn't for B&M. They've been a great sponsor. All our sponsors are great. And but Jack is just, we're friends. And that's the one thing that I enjoy about this too, is I know that fishing can be a business, but with me, I'm friends with all these guys that are my sponsors also. And man, it just makes it a whole lot nicer. It really does.
I agree with you. I agree with you. That's why I like working with the smaller companies because you can call the owner of the company directly.
Yeah. Well, and you and I did a podcast a while back with Mark Riddle, from
Yes, we
Cornfield.
did.
And if you couldn't tell, we were pretty good friends because we get on each other pretty.
You guys were joking around, laughing. Oh, heck yes, you guys are friends. Buddies, man, buddies.
Oh, yeah. We have a good time when we get together for sure.
I'm sure. Yeah, you do. I could tell. That was a fun podcast to do, Russ.
It was. It was.
You have any other shout outs?
I'll tell you what, if you don't mind, of course,
I don't mind.
Hook and Bullet Sunglasses, another great one. We talked about Crappie Magnet. Again, Jeff Smith, a wonderful guy, and he listens to people. When we started talking about a new jig product, he said, "Hey, let's do it." Of course, we have War Eagle boats, Live Scope with Garmin has come on board. It's been awesome. It really has. And, if I'm forgetting someone, you guys know this was
Cornfield Fishing Products?
What's that?
Cornfield Fishing Gear?
Here, yes, sir. Yep. And it's just, like I say, man, we have been blessed. We've been lucky, and we formed some great partnerships. And if you haven't seen our show, like I say, they're completely free. Do you have time to talk about the app, what all it does?
Sure, please. Feel
we
free.
talked at the beginning of this about the app. You have access to all of our shows. And when you open up the app, our shows are actually the first thing on there, and it's always the newest one. But you can get whatever one you want. They have sections to our sponsors. You can go straight. We have articles about fishing in there. Say that you watch a show, say with that guide from Wisconsin, you think, man, that was beautiful up there. I'd like to book a show. You can go to our guide section in the app. It'll list him. You hit that. It's got his bio. And if you think, man, I'd like to book a trip, you can either email or call him right through the app. It goes straight to him. And then one of the features that I really, really like, again, being old school, I can remember keeping a written log of my fishing trips. The air temperature was
You
this,
can
water.
book a guide. Wow.
Yep. Guess what? Everything's electronic now. You go to that section, you put the water temperature, you put what you used, what the wind was, whatever you want to put in there. It's always saved. You can always go back to that date, click on it, and all your information's there. And the best thing about this, it is absolutely free. No matter what phone you have, just go to your app store, click on Brushpile Fishing, and you got it.
That is awesome. That is absolutely awesome. So, guys, man, check that out. Wherever you get apps, whether you have an iPhone or Android, Brushpile Fishing. Anything you want, make your fishing trip more pleasant. And when I go to a place, I have that thoroughly researched before I go to a new lake. This is one way you can do that. I used to have to call tackle stores, and sometimes those boys get busy. They don't have time to sit there and talk to me.
All your information's right there at your fingertips.
That's great. That's fantastic, man. Well, hey, Russ, I know that you're a very busy man. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to our viewers right here on the Let's Talk Fishing podcast.
Hey, it's always a pleasure talking crappie.
Yes, it brings back good memories like we talked about. Brings back some very pleasant memories. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to the Let's Talk Fishing podcast. Again, my name is Jay Angel with very special guest and crappie aficionado, Russ Bailey. And Russ, stick around for a couple minutes. I'm going to end the podcast with that. And guys, it's Wednesday night. Make your plans. Go fishing. You only get to do this once.